Hello, how's everyone doing out there? Hope everyone had a great weekend. And if you're in Asia, gotta get going. Monday morning here. Thank you all for being here once again. We're going to be taking a look at what happened with the downfall of the Spanish Empire, and it's going to be pretty. I think we're going to see a lot of similarities as to what we're seeing today, especially particularly with the U.S. So again, I'm glad you all could be here. A quick roll call here. Modern Cicero. I had an interview with a man who knows him or follows him very well, and I still get his name mixed up. Cicero. Okay. Anyway, Newton Rev, how you doing? Aztec Gold, is the world still here? Yes, we are going to find out if the world is still here. Let's see, Lieutenant Colonel, how you doing, sir? Jack P, how you doing? Chris Primer, Belly Dance Arabia R, how you doing? Be with you guys shortly. Again, thanks for being here. Hello again, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Excuse me. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira, and this is our weekly live stream. Again, thank you all for being here. Really do appreciate it. A quick roll call once again. Let's see. Peter Schultz, how are you doing? Carrie Ellen Wilder, how are you doing? Let's see. Can you ever have too much gold and silver? Well, apparently Spain did, and we'll go through it. Yes, it is a silly question. I think a lot of us will say, of course not, but Spain did, and we're going to see what happened when they did have too much gold. Okay, so stick around. Michael Sayer, how you doing? Hope everything's going good for you on Twitter. Jack P, uh, Tylek me, how you doing? Let's see. Jay Delaney, how you doing? Delaney, first time I've seen your name here. If you are new, go ahead, type in new and where you're from, and we'll see if we can go ahead and acknowledge you there. Mitch Alex, Jack Roth, and Pirate Jack Sparrow took all their treasure. You know that is part of it, right? I mean, there were pirates out there, and they did absolutely take some. So yes, that is true. So again, hello everyone. We glad you could make it here. We are glad you could make it here. And if it is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell to be notified of new updates, and give us a thumbs up if you like what we do. As always, we truly do appreciate your support. And you can always find us on social media. Hang on there. Got the pirate patch over half of me. Anyway, if you're on social media, I mean, you can find us on social media, excuse me. Silverbullion.com.sg, silverbullion.sg, silverbullion.pl for private limited on Twitter, silverbullion.sg for Instagram, audio versions, bit.ly, SBTV, iTunes, and of course, Crisis Tracker. If you do have that Telegram app, whether it's on your phone or desktop, go ahead and search for Crisis Tracker, one word. And this is a group that we have where we put in information as it pertains to financial news, economic news, and of course, gold and silver news. And the first one, silverbullion.com.sg. That is our website, as mentioned. And yes, we do sell gold and silver. We do store gold and silver. In fact, I think we now have one of the biggest vaults in the world, possibly 15,000 ton capacity. And we do specialize in systemic wealth protection. So if you are, having an inkling or an understanding as to what's going on out there, give us a call, shoot us an email, sales@silverbullion.com.sg, and we'll see what options that we have for you, especially because we all know that there is a lot of things going on, and we do need to protect ourselves, especially our families, our health and wealth, of course, right? So do give us a call. And again, really. Do appreciate you being here. Take a quick look at some of the comments going on. Monday morning, rough Monday morning. Hope everything's going better for you out there. Let's see. James Richter, how you doing? 49 fine. Yep. Let's see. JR, hello from Melbourne, Australia. Hope everything's okay out there. Okay, sounds good. Appreciate that, Mr. Seymour Rivers. Pabar, how you doing? Pablo Pina. Let's see. James Robley, hello from Tennessee. How you doing? Glad you could make it there. It's mid evening for you, so glad you could be here and join us. Appreciate that. Patrick Bateman, Manuel de Jesus, how you doing? Yes, absolutely. Join this crisis tracker group, and you can be updated as crisis unfolds. We're pretty active in it. Maybe three, four, sometimes five posts a day. So we will definitely keep you up to date with what's going on. So, having said all that, I want to move over to our upcoming guest. He is someone that you are probably all familiar with. He is David Morgan, Silver Guru. He's widely recognized. He's an analyst in the precious metals industry and consults for hedge funds, high net worth investors, mining companies, depositories, and bullion dealers. He is the publisher of the Morgan Report, which is a world class publication designed to build and secure wealth. And he is the author of the Silver Manifesto as well as Second Chance, and often a featured speaker at investment conferences worldwide. So, David Morgan coming up. I'm sure it's going to be a pretty good interview, and I do hope that you will join us for that interview. And it's because of that our ebook giveaway is going to be David Morgan's book, Second Chance. And his research does show decisively that as much as 90% of profit potential becomes available during the last 10% of the entire bull run, if you avoid what he calls the amateur mindset. Second Chance, How to Make and Keep Big Money from the Coming Gold and Silver Shockwave, empowers you to step on the investment battlefield and leave it a winner. Many fortunes will be made during the coming years. David Morgan, if you would like his book, take a crack at it. Download that Kindle app from your phone or tablet's app store. It is free. Be one of the first five to answer correctly in this live stream before the timer runs out. You'll have about a minute and 30 seconds. And U.S. winners will be given a link to download the ebook. Non U.S. winners, you can ask Amazon to go ahead and give you an alternative price, maybe something like a gift card. Again, it's always Kindle. They do not ship, they do not give ebooks outside of the U.S. And you're going to have to provide us an email. So, what we'll do is my colleague Vincent is here. Hello, Vincent. Good morning. He is here, and he'll go ahead and mute your comment, and that way you can just send your email to him. No one else will see it, and be sure it's just your email only. Okay, email only, nothing else in that comment section or that comment portion. Okay, so I will give the question, but first I want to take a look here. It should be a good interview. Manuel de Jesus, I'm hoping so. David, he's kind of like an octopus. He knows, he's got his arms in everywhere, and he knows just about every part of the economy, the markets, precious metals, uh, bit of comics, things like that. So he's all over. He's one guy you definitely want to get some info from. Okay, so Jay Delaney, that's a good question. Jim Willie, we've tried before. Maybe we'll try again. See if we can get Jim Willie on. It's been a while. Excuse me. It's been a while since we last tried to get him. Okay, so having said that, we'll move on to the question. Okay, so everyone, get ready for that chance at second chance. The question coming from Ted Oakley's interview. According to Ted Oakley, you should have safety capital and blank capital. So, according to Ted Oakley, you should have safety capital and blank capital. This coming from last week's interview with Ted Oakley. I do hope you had a chance to take it in. Ted's very straightforward, very sound, very just right down the middle of the road. No, I mean he's sound, very very sound in his analysis of things. So yes, the answer is coming from Ted Oakley's interview last week. So go ahead and take a shot. You should have safety capital and blank capital, according to Ted Oakley. So we see some answers coming in. We see investment, we see spending, we see investment again, we see liquid, Liquid maintenance. Some great answers there coming in. That's for sure. Let me see. Okay, see what else is out there. Just watching it come through. Um, okay, some good comments. I'm glad you folks had a chance to watch it. Okay, all right. And so I believe we do have our first five that came in, and the answer will pop up soon. There it is. And why am I doing a pirate patch look again? Anyway, yes, the answer is investment capital. Investment capital. And the first five to get it were Paul, investment. And then we had James Richter, who had investment capital. Manuel de Jesus, investment. We had Jack P, investment as well. And then we had Mr. Ebook, Seymour Rivers, investment as well. So congratulations to the top five. Paul, James Richter, Manuel de Jesus, Jack P, and Seymour Rivers. So those will be our five winners, and we'll go ahead and watch that Ted Oakley clip where he does actually say that it is investment. Here we go.
When you have a lot of money, you need to break that money down into a couple of categories so that you don't just put it all together. And one of the things we say is, you have safety capital and you have investment capital. They're two different things. Why do we say that? Is because we think everyone, no matter how much money you could have 1 million or you could have 100 million, but everybody has a choking point where when their assets get to a certain level, they really can't think clearly. And so we've always felt like you've got investment capital and you've got safe capital. And if you confuse the two and everything's in one pot and everything's investment capital, when you get into harder times, people don't have anything to throw, to lay back on. And the problem with that is then you get into where you make poor decisions. As long as you have a safety valve, hey, I'm going to survive. Survival is the key. I'm going to survive, then you're okay. And then the Oxbow principles, that's really the basis of where we start. And then we just take it from there.
Okay, survival is the key. And one thing about survival, you got to have options. Options are key when it comes to survival. Anyway, how true is this, what Ted Oakley had to say? Yes, let your money work for you as well as to protect you. And I'm curious to know, within that statement, I do hear a lot of people say gold and silver are an investment. I do hear a lot of people say gold and silver are a type of insurance. So I'm curious to know how do you see precious metals as an investment or as an insurance, or maybe some of you might even see it as both. So I'm curious to see what you folks think out there. And while that's going on, I will play another clip from the Ted Oakley interview last week.
One of the things about gold is, and yeah, it can correct a bit and that sort of thing, but if you look at what happens over time and you go back and you look at commodities as a group, really relative to financial assets, and I've got a graph going back to 1925. They're at an all-time relative low relative to financial assets. And so if you look at all of that combining, gold should be right up at the front. And one of the things about gold is over time it's come in and out. And I don't think most people know this, but if you go back to January of 2000, gold has really been a great performer. It's outperformed a lot of things. But people don't look at it that way because they see the period, like, for example, from 2011, where it broke down and like, hey, it's not working. But over time, you have to keep gold.
All right. So Ted brings up another great point because actually, yes, it does seem like people they tend to look at just the negative of gold. They'll tell you there's things like no yield. They'll take a current look at the gold charts and they'll tell you, look, it's just been downhill. It hasn't done anything. I mean, why do most people, it seems, tend to only remember or look at the negative part of gold? I mean, I've always been curious about that myself. I mean, if you know gold, then you know what it does, and you can kind of know pretty much what to expect. So, Ted Oakley making another great point there. So, taking a look at some of your comments, uh, Edward, first time here. How you doing? Welcome aboard. From your logo, your avatar, I'm guessing you're over in Miami or at least Florida. So welcome aboard. Glad you made it with us. So Michael, excuse me, Michael Sayer, I see it as both investment because they are manipulated below their true value, insurance, so that my family is set when things implode. Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I mean, I do see it as uh, as an investment and as an insurance myself. I mean, gold fights off inflation, and so that's almost just as good an investment as any out there if you can really fight off inflation and keep you on the plus side of things. And it is an insurance where I think we know things are going to get worse before they get better. And but this is one way to protect yourself, protect what you have, protect your family, maybe even protect your friends out there. So I do see it as an insurance, and for me, the best part of it is it's an insurance that if you never need it, it's so liquid that you can always go ahead and sell it again and go ahead and get your fiat or whatever currency you want. It's that liquid. So if things happen, you have that gold, you have that silver. If things don't happen, liquid enough to where you can sell it back and go ahead and get the currency of the day. So great comment there. Great comment. So I'll go to one more clip from Ted Oakley's interview last week. And again, if you haven't seen it, I do hope you have the chance. Gotta love that guy's suit. Looks really good on him.
Try your best not to get caught up in all of this speculative fever. And right now, we have 4 or 5 aspects of speculative fever. We have the stock market, we have real estate. I have people leaving their businesses to go flip homes, for example. Real estate, we're seeing that. I'm seeing it in NFTs, non fungible tokens, incredible joke in our opinion. SPACs. If you look at the entire spectrum of speculative activity, cryptocurrencies, it's really off the chart. And it makes me think that when you have that speculative activity pulled out eventually, that you'll have a lot of people lose a lot of money. So I think if I had to tell people something, it's try to keep your head on straight in here. It's time to do that.
Keep your head on straight, straighten up and fly right. You old guys, you know that song. And I've come to learn that there is so much FOMO out there that this FOMO is indeed a driving force of speculation. And I get it, and I do get it. I think any gold and silver buyer, we get it, we understand, and we are buying a slow moving investment, slow moving insurance type of asset. So I want to know again what you think. Is this a time to be accumulating money in quotes here, or accumulating insurance? So is it a time to really be in the markets, or is it a time to be pulling some chips off the table and turning them over into gold and silver? As I say all the time, I do hear guys telling me, Patrick, there's a time to make money, and then there's a time to protect what you made. So I guess it really depends on which side of the fence you're on. So again, curious to see your comments there, and I do hope you enjoyed this interview with Ted Oakley, and we'll be moving on to our website soon. I just want to run through some comments here. Let's see. Um, yeah, regarding David's book, in the summary, it's a good reminder that 90% of the gains come in the final 10% of the bull market. So again, if you've been in gold and silver for a while, um, you know, I would say, me personally, I would just hang on to it. I would keep accumulating it because when things start to move, they're going to move. They're going to move really quick. So and again, we are seeing premiums the way they are. They are kind of high. And again, if you go down to your local dealer, chances are he's not fully stocked the way he was. So, I would say go ahead, and if you feel like you need to get some, go ahead and get some. Let's see what else is out there. Okay, all right. Okay, everyone's everyone's fine. Let's move on to our website, silverbullion.com.sg. Again, we do sell gold and silver. We are a bullion dealer. We do store as well. We do have, I think, probably the biggest vault anywhere in the world. Well, we haven't took a peek in China, so maybe there's something out there in China. But this is our website. You can see here, silver price right now in U.S. dollar terms, 26.32. Not much not much change. Gold 1809, again, not much change. It's either a good thing or not a good thing, depending on how you look at it. Investor kit. This is a free investor kit. You can just simply click on this, and you can probably get answers to some of the questions that you have. Star storage account. This is where you can sign up. It is free, and it is free to. I mean, it's free to open, and there are no maintenance fees with it. So, I mean, once you open it, it's yours. And as I just mentioned, options are good to have, and you may find some options in here with your account. Silver to gold ratio 68.8, or roughly it takes 70 or 69 ounces of silver to equal 1 ounce of gold price wise. So still we're stuck between that 65 and 70 range. And then down here we can take a look at some of the products. LBMA bars, which is again still a pretty talked about thing. Um, Gold maples, things like that, Britannias. These are actually pretty nice coins. But getting back to the LBMA bars, these are always the big deal. We have a good stock right now, 324 in the vault. What this means is when you open an account and you go ahead and buy these and store these with us, um, there are 324 bars available and you own it. It is yours. It doesn't go on our balance sheet or anything like that. It is fully segregated, allocated. It is yours. Despite those two fancy words, basically you own it. Excuse me. You own this bar. It is yours. And we have two in the shop. Uh, some strong guy, if he wants to come down, bring his suitcase. He can come pick up these bars if he'd like. And excuse me here. Oh boy. Excuse me. Just need to clear my throat. Sorry about that. And so these bars, if you would like to store them with us, you would click on store in the vault. And what would happen is, yes, you do need an account. You would have to sign up as a user, where you could sign up for a personal account, joint account, trust account, business, joint with the minor, or even a retirement account. The simplest one is a personal account. Just need to fill out the application and send us an ID or copy your ID for us and do sign or click SBTV as a reference. This helps us out. And excuse me, one of the advantages of doing this is because you are eligible for our P2P market. And what this is where you can borrow against your metals when you need it, or you can even lend fiat currency in a safe manner. And what we do is we match the borrowers and the lenders, with the lenders or the borrowers having their metal as collateral. So one important thing: the owners of metal cannot lend their assets; they can only borrow against it. We do not facilitate gold leasing, so this is not a leasing program. It simply means if you have metal stored with us, you can go ahead and use it as collateral to go ahead and take out a peer-to-peer loan. So again, you need to have metal in storage with us, and to lend, you need to send funds to your peer-to-peer account. But you don't need to store metals with us. So if you're looking to get a little bit of yield, looking to earn a little bit of interest on some holdings that you have, you can go ahead and fund your account, and you can go ahead and lend it out to people who are looking to use their metal as as collateral. So that's just a light brush over it. Moving over to Twitter. Again, if you have more questions, just email us sales@silverbullion.com.sg, and we'll help you out with it. So some things that I bookmarked here. First, Domino, Wells Fargo. They're telling its customers that it's shuttering. It's basically it's going to be stopping all personal lines of credit. And so this has been making the news since last week. Might be a good article to take a look at. Re-evolution. We're having the Reddit silver apes. Can they beat the market? So this is another story that's out there. They're trying. They're trying. They're creating a great awareness of silver and what it does, and you are seeing more and more followers of this group, this subgroup in Reddit, and this is a nice pendant. May have to get one. It's a pretty nice pendant. And then we have the 180 with IMF chief sees risk of sustained rise in U.S. inflation. So on one hand, where we have the Federal Reserve saying, this is transitory, 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 IMF IMF comes out and says, hey, wait a minute, this looks like it could be a sustained thing. a sustained rise in U.S. inflation. So again, now we're hearing two sides of the story again. Uh, Tough choice. Who do you believe? Do you want to believe the IMF or do you want to believe the Federal Reserve? That is a tough choice. Do you want to believe either of them? And then we had this come in, the very, very special. They're so special, they need exceptions, right? So special in how the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So we'll take a quick look at this one here. Let's see. So Britain carves out exemption for gold clearing banks from Basel III rule. And I think a lot of us already had this feeling that Basel III, one, it's voluntary. Basel III, two, it was not really going to do much as far as the movement of the gold price, at least maybe not yet. And then we also, a lot of us had a feeling that because the LBMA, World Gold Council, they were creating such a noise that something was going to be done to work in their favor. So Britain carved out an exemption for gold clearing banks from Basel III rule. Take a quick look. So bank clearing gold trades in London can apply for an exemption from tighter capital rules due in January of 2022, a British regulator said on Friday, removing what some said was a threat to the functioning market. So this was a threat. So having tighter rules was a threat. Okay, I know what you guys are thinking out there. I know what you're thinking out there. So let's see. The upcoming rules, known as the Net Stable Funding Ratio (NSFR), are part of Basel III regulations designed to make banks more stable and prevent a repeat of the financial crisis of 2008 2009. Maybe jail wasn't the answer, right? So they're creating new rules for them. The rules that physically traded gold like any other commodity, requiring banks to hold more cash to match their gold exposure as a buffer against adverse price movements. And that one is it's a weird statement to me because I think a lot of us, we kind of had we have a very, very strong feeling that they are the ones themselves that are creating these price movements. So it's kind of a weird statement there, but nonetheless, the LBMA, an industry body, has lobbied against them, saying they are unnecessary and could force some banks, including clearing banks, to stop trading. Okay, and following a consultation, the Bank of England's Prudential Regulatory Authority said on Friday of last week that it had decided to amend its approach to precious metals holdings related to deposit taking and clearing activities. All right. I guess that's pretty much the gist of it again. Jesse Felder, the denizens of crypto have been replicating the work of traditional financial institutions without any of the regulatory guardrails designed to keep them in check. Left unattended, this is not likely to end well. Okay, so I guess I'm not sure if he's talking about Tether, but I think a lot of you guys out there have some suspicions with Tether. Daniel DiMartino Booth. It will be interesting to see how Powell tries to hold his power base. The Federal Reserve is supposed to make mandatory or monetary policy in the public interest. Clearly, it's harming potential home buyers, and this has to do with how involved the Fed is with mortgage backed securities. Okay, they are extremely involved with this. Let's move down here. Um, okay, Nick has a Bitcoiner. Every hyperinflation has occurred on a fiat standard. No hyperinflation has ever occurred on a commodity standard. Every hyperinflation, bar one, has taken place in the 20th or 21st century. And Brett Santiago replied, I think this is likely true, although Spain did experience high levels of inflation when all the silver that was acquired in Central Latin America in the 15 to 1600s was shipped back to Spain. And this is what we are going to talk about. So let me let me come back forward here. So that was a look at Twitter, and this is what we're going to talk about. Where Spain had all that gold, they had all that silver, and what happened? I mean, what happened? And that is going to be our topic of the day: the fall of the Spanish Empire and how gold and silver indeed played a role in it. It actually did play a role. So before I get into it, let me take a look at these your comments here. Let's see. Mutant Ref, I see your comment on NFT. Let's see. Waiting for Biden NFTs. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Strongman, silver and gold. Gold and silver buyers like me are being punished by the system, but it won't last forever. And that's a pretty good statement because I think when we go into buying gold and silver, um, besides the emotional half of it, there's also the fundamental half of it. The part that we actually think through: should we buy gold and silver? And when you look at the fundamental part and you realize again the stimulus, the money printing, the debt, all of these things they really do start to tip the scale. Really start to tip the scale in favor of gold and silver, where it's almost imperative that people understand this and start picking up some gold and silver. So that's a great point there. Um, what else is out there? Um, okay, you guys, funny guys. I love the comments. You guys are good. I can't put them up here, but they're good. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Carl Sidler. First time I've seen you here. Welcome aboard, Carl. My gold and silver is simply insurance. Hopefully, I won't need it, but we all know I will. Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point there. So the fall of the Spanish Empire and how gold and silver indeed play a role in it. All right, so let's take a look at a clip here and kind of get us going and get us all on the same page. Again, as always, uh, keep your take your seat, get your seatbelt on, heads and arms in the bus, and let's just go along for another ride. Spanish Empire.
The Spanish Empire, also known throughout history as the Hispanic Monarchy, was at one time one of the largest empires to ever exist. The Spanish Empire was fairly unique in its structure, and it boasted colonial overseas territories across the Americas, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. During its peak, the monarchy even became known as the empire on which the sun never sets. So how did a powerful force such as the Spanish Empire collapse after centuries of dominating land around the globe? Around the middle of the 16th century, Spain's economy at home was starting to struggle. Overseas, in contrast, the empire was still on a wave of vast expansion, and had not yet hit a rut in that regard. Still, back in Europe, things were not going so well. Expansion-wise, the empire was doing quite alright. With Charles V seizing the throne, the empire was technically expanded without the use of military conquest. Over southern Italy, Austria, the Netherlands, and the Holy Roman Empire. But yet somehow, despite this superficial success, the economy was in a decline. One theory as to why this odd contradiction existed lies in the laid-back approach that the empire took in managing its overseas possessions. While the new colonial territories of the Spanish Empire provided new opportunities for the exploitation of natural resources and for trade around the world, the empire was lax with its subjects, and did not ask for much. What they did ask for, such as a share of their colony's mining earnings, in addition, was often withheld. Furthermore, the Habsburgs had hoped to maintain a state monopoly and closed mercantile system, but more or less failed. Instead,
Okay, so I'll move on from there. The Spanish Empire was indeed global. Okay, I mean we all can picture images of those conquistadors, Columbus, things like that, and of course the gold and silver that they did acquire, exploit, um, steal, however you want to word it out there. I know there's a lot of opinions, and when they came there to the Americas and they saw whether it be the Aztecs, they saw them wearing gold jewelry, and that enticed them to really look for the gold and see where all of these riches were. But on top of this, Spain, the motherland, they allowed and embraced illicit forms of revenue, and eventually its government became corrupt and overtaxed its people. And we saw Spaniards leaving the country. Their money left the country, and Spain taxed its people even more. And we talked about this. money will leave a country, and then you're gonna have the ones who are still there. They're gonna have to pick up the ball and pay the taxes to fund the government. So we've talked about this before, and the country fell into debt and had to borrow. So people under the Spanish crown, they ultimately revolted. And I think we'd all be in agreement if I were to say this is kind of what we're seeing happening right now in a lot of countries, including the U.S., particularly in the U.S. And it's interesting because with Spain, uh, let's call it the holder of the world's reserve currency, I believe, at that time. And today, with all these similar problems that Spain had, uh, it is the U.S. as a country with the world's reserve currency. So all of this is going on, all of it's going on, and then we have these set of circumstances.
As if this new predicament wasn't enough to shake the empire's foundation, the Spanish monarchs were now also faced with the challenge of a Dutch revolt in their Netherland colony. The Dutch were furious with the Spanish Empire for neglecting both their needs and problems and for implementing some of the new damaging taxes from Spain, now in the Netherlands as well. In addition, there was the factor of rising Protestantism, particularly Calvinism, in the Netherland region, that directly conflicted with the Spaniards' strong Catholicism. This revolt sparked a war not just between the Dutch and the Spanish, but even more so between the Spanish and the French, who were eager to join anyone in a campaign against Spain. This war was expensive and long-lasting. The Dutch did gain full autonomy from the Spanish Empire in 1581 as the Dutch Republic, but conflict between the now competing powers continued deep into the 17th century. As taxes continued to rise, so did tensions and dissatisfaction within the empire. In 1640, Portugal, which had only been united with Spain in 1580, erupted into rebellion and eventually declared its own independence from the Spanish Empire. This jolted the European holdings of the Spaniards, and many more of their semi-autonomous territories began threatening their own revolts. And some regions throughout Italy, Flanders, and France even broke free. Adding fuel to the already raging fire, the new issuance of copper coins triggered inflation in 1641, which was counteracted with a messy anti-inflationary reform.
Okay, so as the revolt took place, we saw other countries very eager to join the fight. And I see this again being very similar to countries joining into fight to get off the US dollar. And the dollar is a tool that can often be used and often is used as a weapon. It's often weaponized. And compound this by inflation and the loss of purchasing power by an irresponsible government, that means all the more countries are willing to get away from the USD. Let me take a look at one more clip. Before that, I see quite a few guys out here are on here from Florida. So hopefully you guys can meet up one day and definitely meet up with Andy Sheckman. I believe he's down there in Florida as well. So moving on, one more clip from this. One more clip here. Sorry about that.
At this time, as stated by a French envoy to Spain, it would be difficult to describe to its full extent the disorder in the government of Spain. By the 18th century, the Bourbon monarchs, who replaced the Habsburgs when they were unable to produce another heir, attempted to mend the issues arising within their empire, but they were undermined by their own thirst for war and further expansion. At this point, Protestantism was spreading like wildfire, and the Spaniards were inspired to fight back in the name of Catholicism, as well as feeling compelled to directly oppose the Ottoman Empire's advances, as they too hoped to expand their influence. This uptick in warfare cost money, and the Spanish Empire lacked a surplus of finances. Hoping to counteract this problem, the Bourbon monarchs aimed to re-establish a Spanish monopoly, as had been attempted before, but they were stopped by the terms of the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which ended the War of Spanish Succession. The empire tried to offset this blockade by rolling out strict new trade and commerce reforms, both at home and overseas, which eventually sparked a war with the British in the late 1700s, demonstrating the never-ending chaos that had been created. Some local political writers even recognized the growing monetary problems and sent letters to the crown, suggesting that royal expenditure must be regulated, the sale of office halted, the growth of the church checked. The tax system must be overhauled, special concessions must be made to agricultural laborers, rivers be made navigable, and dry lands irrigated. Furthermore, the authors even pointed out directly the empire's humiliating dependence on foreign nations, but it was too late. Because of these internal problems, the territories of the Americas were pretty much neglected, as they were a very good stream of gold and silver, and not a territory to be more populated and incorporated more under Spanish authority. The Spanish administration in the Americas was inferior to the English administration, as the new English and later British territories had a rapid growth in population, due to liberal immigration policies attracting large proportions of German and French people. Meanwhile, the Spanish territories had a slow growth, due to greater emphasis on military conquest, many early failures to establish permanent settlements, and poor relations with Native Americans. At the start of the 19th century, Napoleonic France invaded Spain, and this was the fire that sparked the revolutions in the Americas. The other viceroyalties rebelled, as their home nation was too weak to have the reins, and it was clear that Spain was just a shadow of its former self. The revolutions had success, and it was clear that Spain wasn't able to fight them. In just a few years, they lost almost all of their American possessions, and at the end of the 19th century, after the Spanish-American War, they lost Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, marking the official end of the empire. The sole reason for the collapse of the Spanish Empire was essentially ill management by the monarchs and possibly overconfidence of their ability to maintain stable colonial territories. In less simple terms, money or lack thereof and poor judgment played a hugely significant role in the humiliating fall of an empire with so much potential at its start.
Yeah, sounds some pretty heavy stuff there. Before I move on, Fat Vegan, appreciate your super chat. Yeah, a cup of coffee. Here you go, my man. Thank you, Fat Vegan. Appreciate it. And one more time out there, Fat Vegan, again, appreciate it. You're one guy who's always here, so we appreciate your support there. And yes, hit the like button. We do appreciate that as well. So, Fat Vegan, thank you very kindly. Do appreciate it. So, with these things going on, I mean, disorderly government. Spain was involved in wars that the government could not fund, or got to a point where they couldn't fund it. It was heavily, overly dependent on other nations, and people were calling for regulation of government expenditure. Sounds all too familiar. And I haven't taken a deep look into this, but I understand the budget ceiling is coming up at the end of this month, the U.S. Budget ceiling, and Yellen is already saying that there's going to be trouble unless Congress does something about it. Are they going to raise the ceiling, or are they going to extend it once again? We'll see what happens. And I think Yellen is she's started to sound the horn that if the U.S. doesn't do anything, I think the word default is kind of floating around there. So we'll see what happens later on this month. But getting back to it, so we know some of what ate up Spain's gold and silver, their wealth, was ill-advised spending. And although there is another story to this that was lightly touched upon. Now, the fall of the Spanish Empire, in the span of a few hundred years, Spain transformed from the world's largest empire, acquiring seamlessly endless wealth in the New World, to a modern periphery country plagued by its economic decline from centuries earlier. And the Spanish management of the Americas and its riches in the century after discovery started them on their journey to financial ruin and relative insignificance. Now, retrospect makes one wonder whether the discovery of Peru, meaning silver, has been more beneficial or more mischievous to Europe. and just as an anonymous 17th century writer did. Opinions aside, Columbus's voyage in 1492 did kick off the Spanish presence in the New World. Within a few decades, Spain went from not knowing that the Americas even existed to overtaking native empires and extending their massive bureaucracy across thousands of square miles. While fame and faith were certainly important, the finances played a massive role in motivating that Spanish expansion. So the ancient power of gold and riches was too strong for the Spanish to resist, diving into a full blown empire a world away. The excitement of the early 16th century treasure ships traveling back to the continent full of gold and silver set the table for the disappointment of the later 16th century and 17th century economic declines that would symbolize the decline of the Spanish Empire. The first Spanish conquistadors were thrilled to see all the gold and silver worn by the Aztecs and Incan royalty and strove themselves to find the mines that offered such valuable substance. The Spanish found plenty in the early 16th century, and the American bullion would come to make up about 25% of Philip II's total revenue. Near the end of the century, as the flood of gold and silver wrung from the mountains of the New World enriched the Spanish treasury. Yet more money does not necessarily constitute more wealth, as Spain would find out. Let me play another clip for you.
Let's go to the thought bubble. So Spanish mines in the Americas produced over 150,000 tons of silver between the 16th and the 18th centuries, over 80% of the world's supply. Spain became the richest nation in Europe, and Spanish silver pesos became the de facto currency. But the Spanish royal family does not appear to have understood inflation, and the huge influx of silver caused skyrocketing inflation, and since they never set tax rates to account for it, they collected the same amount of money 60 years after the discovery of silver, but that money was worth a fraction of what it once had been. And in general, it's not clear that Spain benefited much from the discovery of silver. Rich countries have a way of finding their way into expensive and not totally necessary wars, and Spain was no exception. While empire wasn't the central cause of Spain's many 16th century wars, it sure did fund them. So in 1519, which was a heck of a year for Spain, Charles V united the kingdoms of Spain and Austria by being named head of the Holy Roman Empire, so called because it was not holy, not Roman, and not an empire. Charles had this dream of a unified Central Europe, which was constantly being thwarted by German nobles who had a dream of a non-unified Central Europe, and eventually Charles V's ambitions were shattered, and he gave the Austrian half of his kingdom to his son Ferdinand, and gave Spain, with the American stuff, to Philip in 1556. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So Philip II didn't only inherit all of Spain's holdings in the Americas and in Europe and in the Philip not a coincidence-ines, he also inherited a rebellion in the Netherlands because the Dutch were like, we're gonna be Protestant. Also, you guys know nothing about economics, which incidentally the Dutch are still saying to the Spanish. And then the English sided with the Dutch, and there was a war featuring a disastrous invasion of England called the Spanish Armada in 1588. England's success against the Spanish, even though it can largely be chalked up to weather, was credited to Queen Elizabeth I. That led to a period of wealth and national pride, which meant that people had both the money and the desire to see, I don't know, plays about old English kings named Richard. And that, my friends, is how the discovery of silver in Bolivia contributed to the genius of William Shakespeare. Anyway, American silver didn't cause these wars any more than it wrote Hamlet, but the new wealth made both more possible. Knowing that they had this enormous silver war chest at their disposal made them much more inclined to build all those ships that got sunk in 1588. And soon enough, even a mountain of silver couldn't pay for all their warring, and the Spanish crown had to borrow money, which they couldn't pay back, so they defaulted on their debts several times in the 17th century. Yay, silver!
Okay, so essentially, this endless stream of wealth or money was used for endless wars. And again, this is sounding way too familiar, except for one thing. You see, back then, you still needed physical gold and silver to fund your wars. That was your money. Today, all you need are keystrokes. Excuse me. Keystrokes, printing press, far more dangerous. Nonetheless, the point being there was simply too much money, and inflation started to set in, and this became known as the price revolution or the Spanish price revolution. Let me take a quick look at that here. According to Wikipedia, the price revolution, sometimes known as the Spanish price revolution, was a series of economic events that occurred between the second half of the 15th century and the first half of the 17th century. And again, I believe this was when Spain was the world's, Spain's currency was the world's reserve currency. I do believe that was at this time. And most specifically linked to the high rate of inflation that occurred during this period across Western Europe. Prices rose on average roughly sixfold over 150 years. The level of inflation amounts to 1 to 1.5% per year, and relatively low inflation rate for modern day standards, but rather high given the monetary policy in place in the 16th century. So I want to come here and take a look at this other short clip here. In fact, I think I have it open here. Okay, so let me go ahead and play this for you. Whoop. For some reason, where's the sound? I don't know why the sound didn't come up. Let me try this one then. Okay. All right. So the sound, for some reason, it's not coming up. I'm not sure why it's not there. Okay. Sorry about that. So what it basically was saying was that inflation started to set in because when all this gold and silver was transported to Spain, people weren't working for it, and people there knew, the merchants knew that there was a lot of gold and silver now in the economy floating around. So a lot of money, a lot of gold and silver chasing a few products. And again, that's pretty much the definition of inflation right there. So what happened was things started to become more and more and more expensive. And Spain, therefore, wasn't producing much of anything. They weren't producing things, and they basically, excuse me here, they weren't producing things. They were paying other countries to produce their things because they had a whole lot of wealth. And again, this is pretty eerie because when you think about it, this is exactly what countries like the U.S. are doing. They're not manufacturing as much. They're not producing their own goods as much, and we have that printing press that is, actively out there spitting out cash, and we are paying other countries to create things for us. So again, as the world moves forward in manufacturing and things like that, the U.S. starts to fall backwards, and this was exactly what happened with Spain. Okay, so let me get back to my notes here. Sorry about that. I thought it played earlier. I don't know why it didn't play, but nonetheless, the fall of the Spanish Empire still, despite the inflation in Spain, the Spanish Habsburgs kings could not help but fall into the trap of using their newly acquired and greatly desired bullion to finance extremely costly military ventures that stretched the Spanish economy even more thinly. And the newfound gold and silver funded the aggressive tactics of the monarchs, but directly through or both directly through payments and indirectly through paying loans or paying back loans taken to pay for their armies. One thing I want you to notice here, this photo here, um, Habsburgs. I think it is proven that because they did intermarry, uh, they started to have a jaw that a pretty overextended and pronounced jawline, and this is one of the features that science does believe that you are from that line. So I again, it's something that I came across as well. So if you notice all their nobility, they did have that pronounced jawline. So, an aggressive foreign policy gave the illusion of prosperity created by American gold and silver, and the kings relied immensely on Spain's gold and silver and allowed their debts to rise very high, but seemed to think little of what may happen if that gold and silver lost its sturdiness while their debts were still too high. The confidence caused the kings, especially Charles V and Philip II, to continue to command an unprecedented amount of credit and thus fund their imperial adventures because of the windfall acquisition of mineral resources from the American mines. And the monarchs thought this little they thought little of the trap in this reliance and instead saw the increased capacity for loans as a unique opportunity to exert themselves militarily. The debt continually grew as conflicts all over Europe were incited and continued by armies paid by the Spanish American silver. The cost of the conflicts, coupled with the cost of repaying the debts accumulated for these conflicts, neutralized any benefit the gold and silver may have created. And they added to the initial economic woes of price inflation and the American imperial toll. The constant acquisition of loans by the Habsburg monarchs and the required subsequent repayments further dug the Spanish economy into an inescapable hole that would suffocate the country on the eve of modernity. Modernity, excuse me. Most of the New World bullion did not even make it to Spain. It went directly to pay for the armies and their expenses and to service the crown's debt, causing it to almost immediately flow out. Okay, but not so fast here. There is one other event or country that led to the fall of Spain, and yet silver played a role in it as well. Once again, here we go.
So most of the silver mined in the Americas went to Europe, but at least a third of it went to China, either directly on Spanish galleons or indirectly through the purchase of Chinese goods. China had encountered inflation of its own after printing the world's first paper money in the 12th century, so they switched back to coins. Initially, Chinese coins were made out of copper or bronze, but their economy was so big, they were the leading producer of consumer goods until the 19th century, that they ran out. So they went to silver. Now, China didn't have a lot of silver itself, but Japan did, so they traded manufactured goods for it, but soon even that wasn't enough. This was mostly because in the 16th century, China changed its tax structure. Taxes, man, they're at the center of human history. In the early part of the Ming Dynasty, Chinese farmers paid their taxes in goods, mainly grain and labor. But as more silver entered the economy, the Ming government changed its policy and required taxes to be paid in silver. This meant that almost everyone in China had to produce something that could be sold for silver, which usually meant silk. In fact, the Ming government often required people to make silk. That glut of silk inevitably led to a price drop, which hurt the Chinese economy, but not nearly as much as it hurt the Spanish economy, where almost every silk producer was put out of business. So much for the idea that global outsourcing is a new problem. You'd think that all this silver would make the Chinese incredibly rich, just like the Spanish, right? Well, yes, just like the Spanish, in that they got rich, but they didn't stay rich. The Ming government also failed to peg taxes to inflation and spent too much on defense, notably the Great Wall. And by the 17th century, the Ming were overthrown by the Fu Manchus. Oh, it's just the Manchus? Ugh, history always disappointing. As the historian Dennis Flynn put it, a significant hunk of the GDP of China, then the world's biggest economy, was surrendered in order to secure a white metal that was produced mostly in Spanish America and Japan. Think about what else those resources could have been used for. The Spanish Empire's silver trade was the first truly global market. Even India was involved, but we're really out of time. And its consequences were dire, even if it did make some people rich. Both Spain and China experienced inflation that weakened their governments.
Okay. It's interesting that the sudden influx of gold actually contributed to Spain's relative decline. But that's the part, how could an influx of gold cause this? Because the Spanish had so much gold, they could easily buy commodities from other countries without producing them itself. And again, this sounds like the US today. Since consumer goods could easily be bought, there was little incentive to produce goods and undertake the necessary investment and develop the technology to produce goods. This is where we are today. So therefore, it is argued that this easy wealth can be a factor in limiting economic development. I mean, why make it if you can just pay for it, right? Newly found wealth. So look at all the stimulus and support being given right now. Are we investing in worthwhile, survivable, sustainable industries, or are we speculating in a government-funded casino? Are we speculating in a government casino? And again, that's the thing, because what we saw happen in Spain, where they found that newly created wealth, or that newly found wealth, I should say, they didn't really have to work for it. And again, it caused inflation. Everybody knew they had it. Prices of goods went up, and basically all that money was spent or spread all over the world. And as a result, Spain still had to continue with their wars and expansion, and they just didn't have the money for it. And that more or less contributed ultimately to the downfall of Spain. So that's going to end the topic of the day. I mean, I do hope it was useful out there. I appreciate you guys hanging in there. let me just take a look at the comments here. Beverly Smith, yes, exactly. Spain produced very little at that time, and again, it's very similar to the U.S. I mean, our the manufacturing base, it's all shipped out. It's gone overseas, it's gone across the borders, and to try and fire up that manufacturing base, it's going to be a mission. If it can even do that, and I'll play a clip. I'll play a clip on that. So I just want to run through some comments here. Um, let's see. Let me just run through some comments here. Uh, okay. Sorry guys, just hang with me. I'm trying to run through it. Yeah, Vincent, absolutely. Ultimate, unlimited. Excuse me. Money printing today delays the inescapable hole, even when governments print trillions of currencies, and that is true. Again, I mean, you got to consider it was real money back then, real gold, real silver. I mean, they couldn't just print the thing out of thin air. They did actually have to have it. Okay, and it was physical gold, physical silver, and yet it was overprinted in a way where because there was really, as far as Spain was concerned, there wasn't much labor or anything like that to get that money, newly created wealth, and it was basically government plundered it instead of putting that money into their own building up their own country. They went and expanded overseas into wars and expanded into you know globalization of the time and bought up things instead of producing it themselves. So anyway, we'll move on to the commentary section here. The sudden inflow of gold was not good for the long-term development of the Spanish economy. It could have been good, but because of the government at the time, and it does partly explain why the Spanish economy came to lag behind the rest of Europe until the post-war period. Again, it lagged behind Europe because they basically used that money to buy goods from all over the world in different places instead of continuing to manufacture them themselves. And this is what's happening with the U.S. today. It has become a debtor nation that lags. And if you saw the Ted Oakley interview recently, I asked him this question, and I feel this is a hugely important question because it kind of tells you that we are at a fork in the road right now, and which way are we going to go? Ted Oakley administration, and what's on their mind right now is infrastructure and things like that. But can the U.S. tool up and fire up the mills and factories and farms to compete in the world in manufacturing and production and attract foreign direct investment the way it once did before with the promise of growth and ingenuity? Or have these days passed?
I think they're past. Well, I'll tell you why. I think that everything they're doing now, eventually, okay. Now, if you look at the last 18 months, the dollar's gone, from, it's down, got all the way to 90, back up to around 92. We think long term, though, the dollar continues to decline. You can't have a declining dollar and go back to what you were describing, Patrick. Those two don't go hand in hand. Basically, if anything, that would mean we would get into stagflation. So I don't think that happens. I think you get into a situation where people will talk about that and they want to bring out and really pat themselves on the back and that sort of thing, but it won't really happen because the dollar will be declining.
Okay. So ultimately, what happened to that Spanish gold? It slowly spread around the world, and as the Spanish bought goods, it also it's also worth noting here that although it was huge sums at that time, huge sums of gold, it was still a fraction of today's annual gold production. From 15 to 1600, total gold production was estimated to be at about 36 tons. From 1900 to 1976, it's about 76,000 tons. So quite a big difference there. But with governments and central banks repeating the same mistakes, and with nothing new under the sun, it all points back to holding real money and holding governments to account to real money. Real money is just a half of it. You have to hold your government to account. That's probably the bigger half of it. You have to hold governments to account to real money by using it for productive and not destructive means. So as governments inflate, tax, and debase their dollar, storing the value of your dollar, your wealth, makes holding physical gold and silver one of the most important things you can do. Reserve your future with silver and gold. And I think, you know, the thought of this statement, reserving your future with silver and gold, I think that's going to be something that we're going to possibly see more and more where to claim our future, reserve our future, we're going to need things like silver and gold. So that'll end the commentary section there, and I just want to take a look at the few comments. Um, yeah, Jay Delaney, I see that comment there. Um, I did see a few comments there. I wanted to take a look at, see if I can find them again. Um, but anyway, yeah, I mean, so it's I mean it's this is pretty important. I mean, and again, because at the end of this month, what is Congress going to do? Are they going to push back? You know, the debt ceiling, or are they going to expand on it? Are they going to extend on it? And it's going to be a very loud, clear, and loud message for the rest of the world, where I think you would see people who are going to uh, depending on what the U.S. does, it's going to affect their U.S. holdings. Whether they want to continue buying treasuries, or things like that. So, very very important decision coming up at the end of the month. So, I want to take a look at a few comments here. Uh, JM, absolutely, reserving your future with silver and gold is like reserving your life jacket on the lifeboat, or and lifeboat on the Titanic. You could say that. You definitely could say that, because again, this silver and gold. I mean, it's are there better investments? Yes. I'll even say that. Yes, there are. But are there better investment slash insurance vehicles? Are there better insurance vehicles themselves, stores of wealth, things like that? Hard to find. Hard to say yes to that answer. So again, you know, is this the time to make money, or is this the time to protect what you made? That's what it really, really, really what it boils down to. Mr. Nguyen, yes, we have to stay together. We have to stay together again. Be a blessing. Be a blessing. Try not to be a burden. We're all in this boat together. I mean, if that Titanic is an example, as that earlier comment, I don't think it mattered. Whether you were in a tuxedo, or whether you were in shorts and flip flops, whatever it is. Um, there are times when you're there are things in life that will happen, that it's not gonna discriminate between rich and poor. So, having said that, you are going to have to make sure that when these things in life do happen, that you can transition, at least transition what you have today into the next so-called monetary system, once it really starts to take shape and grab hold. So again, very very important stuff here. um, Let me take a look at a few more comments before we head out here. um, let's see. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. I think you guys are you guys are on it. I'm impressed. Carrie Ellen Welder, reserve your future with gold and silver reserves. Absolutely. Don't necessarily listen to what banks are saying, but definitely take a look at what they're doing. And if they are buying things like gold, definitely want to buy gold. And you definitely want to accumulate silver as well. Not professional advice, just saying, these are things that I do, because me and probably you out there, we have a pretty good sense of what's going to happen. Will it happen tomorrow? No. But it gives us more time to get a better and bigger insurance policy. Better and bigger insurance policy. Let's see, quite low. Sorry about that. Okay. So I think, having said that, yes, please, like buttons always do help out. Um, okay. So again, having said that, do what you can. Again, be a blessing. Be a blessing, not a burden. A lot of people are going to need help out there, and just stay alert to things. Stay up to speed with news. Join our Telegram crisis tracker group. We'll put things in there, things that are pretty important. Sift through the weeds for you, and do sign up for an account. Sign up for an account. It's free, and you never know. You're going to need options. We are all going to need options. So take the time to do that if you can. Do appreciate it. So having said all these things, yes, you have a great week as well. The MiG 26, thank you for that. Uh, Belly dance, yes, absolutely. Don't listen, don't listen to them. Just do what they do. Uh, Hoard gold and silver. Accumulate as much as you can. And having said all that, thank you for being here. I'll see you guys next week. As always, saddle up for what's coming ahead and silver up as well. Take care, everyone.